It's a place where every child can come and somebody knows their name. They have a sense of belonging. We understand the impact and the value of a coach in a child's life. And so the goal of the programs are to create that mentorship, create those coaches that can cheer them on, empower them, believe in them. And we use physical literacy as a tool. We're across the stands watching this, right? And then all of a sudden you look up in the stands behind their bench and the moms are just wham, they're Superman punches. They're brawling in the stands. It's a kid's football game. We're sitting there I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. Like, what's happening? Life is a tough place. I think most people want to do the best. And as a parent, I think the majority of parents want to create the best life possible for their children. And sometimes, in a society that's built upon money, sometimes you can't do the things you want to do for your child because of that barrier. I honestly believe if somebody calls you coach, that is 100% the greatest name a person can refer you to as. Because when you look at what do coaches offer and what are coaches supposed to be, right? It's the mentor, it's the encourager, the empowerer, the person that believes in you, the one that's going to put you in a position and lead you so you can succeed. Those are huge values that come with that title coach.
Will Loftus knows firsthand how impactful a coach can be on a child, and he's committed to making sure that as many children as possible are impacted positively. Hey there, I'm Scott Rintoul, and welcome to another episode of Better Sports Parents, where world-class performers from across the sports landscape share their insight and perspective in order to help you and me become a better sports parent. And with the Grey Cup recently handed out and another CFL season in the books, it was high time we welcomed a former football player to the podcast. Will Loftus has a pair of Grey Cup rings from his 11-year career in the Canadian Football League, despite not playing the sport until his mid-teens. Now, like a lot of former players, Will transitioned into coaching once his playing days were done. But what he coaches is much bigger than the sport he excelled in professionally. Will is the founder of Game Ready Fitness, a program and facility that provides opportunity for all kids, regardless of their financial situations, to play and develop physical literacy. He and his team work with youth of all ages and abilities each and every week, and he's also raised two daughters who navigated their own youth sports journeys. Will has been and continues to be face-to-face with the realities of the youth sports environment, and he's here to share what he sees and what he's learned with all of us. So let's get to it. My conversation with Will Loftus. Will, thank you very much for doing this and spending time with me here on Better Sports Parents.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It's great catching up after all these years. Yeah, it's pretty awesome when I got the message there. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your expertise here, because I think there's a lot of people who can relate to what you're going to say and the perspective you have on the subject of youth sports. And before we dive into where we are today in youth sports and what your current role is, I want to go way back, a few decades, in fact, and talk about what your youth sports experience was like, because I think that informs all of us in our lives. So what was a young Will Loftus involved in, and what was youth sports like back in your day?
Well, sports has been a huge part of my life, right? And I'm really blessed to have had sports a part of my life. And it, definitely defines sort of the trajectory of my journey in life as well, right? And, being a kid and being introduced to sports, like the first sport was track, and it was awesome. You just get out there and run, right? And faster you run, the better you do. And, you get rewarded, right? You get a ribbon or a medal or whatnot. And, it was something that was pretty amazing. It was awesome. And then obviously, in elementary school, the PE system does a great job of introducing you to these different sports. And you sort of have an opportunity to like try different things, see what you like, see what you'd enjoy. And obviously having the teams that they have in elementary school was great because then it sort of gave you a different perspective to going to school every day. Like generally going to school was, sitting in a classroom and getting taught, right? But, it was also an opportunity to develop relationships outside the classroom with your classmates, right? And that was so powerful, right? Because it gave you something to participate in, it gave you something to be a part of, something to belong to, and it just really fulfilled like the full scope of being a youth, right? You know, you had your education in the classroom, you had your sports teams that you played on, and you know, you got to surround yourself with other like-minded individuals, right? So it was phenomenal.
So is it fair to say that your access to sport as a young boy was mainly through community sport and through the school system?
Yeah, it was, majority was through the school system. Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was like, you know, obviously today's day and age is a lot different, right? We, you know, the club sports, club teams, and whatnot, and things like that. But it was, you know, through the school programming and school sports.
You grew up in Vancouver. Was your family an athletic family? Were they concerned with getting you in a lot of sports? How did that perspective shape where you went with youth sports?
I think it wasn't, not necessarily my family was, like, athletic and whatnot, right? I think my dad played some, like, same thing, high school sports and things like this, right? And my mom potentially too, right? But, it's honestly a good question because 'cause I've never asked them that, you know? But, I think the biggest goal was to get me tied into something, right? And I think they understood the value of being tied in and the value of being a part of something, and, just, you know, as a young guy, just a way to exert myself, like, you know, a young fella got all this energy, like, "What do we do? What do we do?" Right? And, so, you know, getting me in sports really fulfilled that goal as well.
So for them and their approach, when you think back, were they the kind of parents that coached you, or were they very hands off and let you lead the way?
Well, they were definitely hands off. You know, and the dynamics of growing up in my, family's life was a little different, right? You know, and I'm sure everybody's life is a little different in the dynamics, right? And, it was more like, "That's my little thing. That's my thing to go do." And they let me go do it, you know, and they trusted the coaches from the schools that were around me, that were gonna lead me in the right direction and, you know, do the right things and try to help me fulfill my goals with it. But, you know, as a kid, you don't really have goals with the sport. You're honestly just out there to have a good time with your buddies, right? You know? And then when something clicks with it, that's sort of when the switch goes and it's like, you know, I can do this, I can play this, but I can also be the best version of myself with it, you know, and that comes from the practicing, the applying yourself, the whole whatnot, right? So
It sounds to me like you played a multitude of sports, everything from track to, I mean, my guess is in your school, things like basketball, volleyball, soccer, whatever were offered. Were you a multi sport athlete?
I tried to be. No, no, that's the way it is, right? You're always gonna try to get out there and try everything, right? You know, but I mean, it was awesome, right? My started off my family, we'd moved out to like to Surrey when I was a little guy, and started running track at Cloverdale Catholic Elementary School. And you know, it just happened to be I was pretty fast, so I would win a lot of races and things like this, right? And then you know, we ended up moving back into Vancouver, 5th grade. And I never forget, it was, you know, you're a new kid at the school. You're just like, you know, you don't know what's going, like, you know, it's brand new surroundings, right? You're trying to like find your place, right? And I remember how, first thing the kids said to me at school, like they say, "What do you do? Like, what do you play?" And I was like, "Oh, well, you know, I run track." And, you know, and they're like, "Oh, you know, are you fast?" I said, "Well, you know, I'm pretty fast, I think, right?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, well, she's the fastest in our class. This girl who was in our class was the fastest in the class." So I was like, "Okay, cool, right?" You know, she's like, and then the kids are like, "Well, let's have a race," right? So what they did is after school, we went to the gymnasium and they said, "Okay, so you're on this wall, she's on this wall. You guys are gonna run to the stage and then run back to the wall, right?" And I mean, I remember I was like, you know, "Okay, well, you know, I'll run," right? And sure enough, you know, took off, hit the stage, hit the wall, and, you know, obviously I beat the young girl, right? And after that, all of a sudden I was completely accepted. Like right away, kids like, "Oh, wow," you know, like, you know, that was crazy, right? And so it was something where like athletics helped me honestly like build new friendships, but also simply be accepted amongst my new peer group, right? So yeah, I always remember that moment.
Well, and there are those defining moments along the way, and they're defining people as well, which I'm sure we'll get into. How did you find your way into football, and what was it about football that really had you take an interest in that sport primarily?
Once again, it was a peer group, right? You know, I had after elementary school, I went to John Oliver High School in Vancouver, and you know, at the time, sure enough, first thing is, you know, you get into homeroom class, right, when you show up at the school, and they announced that there's going to be soccer tryouts after school. And so right away I'm thinking, okay, like I can run, like I'm going to join soccer. Went out there and made the soccer team. And, after that, the next thing across the announcements comes the basketball team. And so, tried out for that. And it ended up being sort of the same kind of group of guys that would all do these sports, right? And they're all your friends now at this point. And it was unbelievable. It was football, had no idea about it, didn't know anything about it, didn't really know like many people that ever played it. But on Friday nights when we were young, we used to go to Grace Park on 33rd and Fraser there. And we'd meet up and then we would play like football. It was tackle football on the grass, like you're just kids, right? But there were a couple kids there that played football, and they were like way better than everybody else. Like they were just unbelievable. We used to think like because they were all muscles and things like this, right? And so they used to beat us up all the time, but it was awesome. And then so what happened was is amazing coach, this amazing coach Ron Turner. He was our English teacher at the school, and before John Oliver used to have a football program. And basically he was looking at the dynamics of our school and all these young fellas and all these young guys and how to tie us in. And in 10th grade, he brought in a football program, right? Which is truly amazing because now as an adult, you realize like how much work goes behind the scenes in order to implement a football program, like the equipment, the cost, like the time, the other coaches that are going to come out and volunteer their time. Like it is a huge monumental feat, right? But he did it. And I remember, I was like a real skinny kid, and all my buddies went out to the football team, and my mom wasn't gonna let me play football. She's like, "You're way too skinny. You're gonna get destroyed out there, right? There's no chance, right?" And finally, after begging and pleading, and all my buddies had made the team, they went to the tryouts and whatnot, and then finally she let me play. And you know what? Honestly, just fell in love with the game. Had just such amazing coaches that were out there. And what really got me was their passion, right? They were passionate about it. They were passionate about teaching us like the proper techniques, like how do you catch a football? How do you run with the football? The intricacies of the game, right? And, at the end of the day, I was just a tall, lanky, skinny kid. And I'm out there with the guys, and it really was something so powerful that it just stuck with me. The passion grew, the love for the game grew, and, honestly, I was blessed to be able to pursue it all the way to the pros.
Yeah, you certainly were, and more than a decade in the pros and a couple of championship rings in the Canadian Football League. But I want to re-emphasize this point for the people in the back who may not have heard. You did not start playing football until grade 10,
Yeah,
and then you went on to a professional career. And I want to emphasize that point, Will, because of what so many people view as the pathway to professional sports and how early you have to start. You are living proof that you do not have to start early.
true, yeah, I mean, it's sort of I think, like, when kids are young, it's so important to develop the athlete, right? And, that's where I attribute the track is number 1. Track is phenomenal. Like, I mean, any youth growing up should be running track. It's such a transitional sport. Every sport we play, you've got to run. Soccer, baseball, whatever. And I think it's huge. And also soccer, right? Just the agility, the hand foot coordination. Like being able to see the field, being able to pass. All these little things, they all build, right? And they build into sort of your repertoire of who you are, what kind of athlete you're going to be. And I think it's really powerful at the young ages just to try the different sports, right? Also one of the sports that I was really tied into up until 7th grade was baseball. I love baseball. I was a pitcher, shortstop, center field, and once again, it was just like a whole different sphere of sport compared to football, right? You got to have hand-eye coordination. You got to, patience is a big deal, but I think it's once again, I think that's where you attribute a lot of things to going back and having coaches around you that are willing to teach you and, help you succeed at all these different sports. But I think the encompassing a full athlete, doing multiple sports as a young person is huge.
You mentioned your coach, Ron Turner, and the impact that he had on starting the program and the impact he had really not just on you, but on your classmates. Was he the one that really allowed you to believe in yourself to pursue it at the next level, or was there someone else influential at that time in your life?
He was hugely impactful, but I also had a huge why, right? When you're young and you define yourself with the and you have a why as to why am I going to be all in with this, right? And it was one of those situations where I looked at it as a vehicle, as a tool that, this could actually really be something. I mean, the thing is, up until 10th grade, I was playing basketball, and we all thought we were going to the NBA the whole night. And the funny thing was, I stopped growing. And so, hey, that might be out the window, but then you know what? This football is actually pretty good, right? I think because I had a real strong why as to why I wanted to be successful at it was sort of like the motivating factor and desire and the passion, right? That helped me to pursue it. Along the journey with that football was when we were in 12th grade. I never forget. We were in a championship game, right? We had to go. We were playing at BC Place championship game, and it was pouring rain outside at the practice. It was like the walkthrough day before the game, and we're out there on the gravel field doing our stuff. We were all circled up as a team. Coach Turner said, he said, "Some of you here have the ability to take this game all the way." He wasn't directly talking to me, but those words stuck with me through my whole journey because I just took it like he was maybe potentially talking to me. Like, maybe this coach thinks I can do it. Like the weight that the words that a coach says to a young person are huge. And, life is full of adversity and trials and what tribulations. But the end of the day is when you have things like that to hold on to, they truly push you through. Right? And, it's like the old analogy, right? When you have somebody in your life that believes in you more than you potentially believe in yourself, oftentimes when things get tough, you might want to quit on yourself, but you won't want to quit on that person that's believing you and supporting you and empowering you behind you, right? So it was just multiple moments like that that truly sort of impacted me and helped me pursue my dream and career.
Certainly doesn't hurt when you then go into that championship game and lock down a future NFLer in Jerome Pathon and winning the championship.
We had help. We were pressing him on the line. I was playing over top. Yeah. Jerome was an unbelievable player, like unbelievable athlete. Just the smoothest guy you could ever see as a receiver, for our generation. That's when you see football is truly a team game. And when you get a whole bunch of unbelievable guys and talented athletes and they apply themselves, we were all in that day. And that was the beauty of it, and I mean, so many of those guys were still bros today. We still get together. Our families now get together and hang out and whatnot. And it was a huge moment in our lives. But you know what? It happened to be our day that day. Football's one of those games where you show up, you give your best. Sometimes the best is not good enough. But the cards all fell our way that day, and here we are, 30 something years later, and still talking about it, right? So
Well, and it's one of the things that I think is beautiful about the game of football, which is a violent game, and some people aren't into it, and that's fine. But one of the beautiful things about the game is that, well, I haven't looked at your roster, and I couldn't tell you how many players from your team went on to play beyond high school. I know that the chances are very few of them did. But there is a value associated with people who are built in every single way you can think of. There is a value placed on people who might be considered too big and slow to excel in another sport. There's a value played on a small, quick player. There's a value placed on an intelligent player. There's a value placed on a fast, athletic player. And it's this melting pot of all different types of people that come together to achieve a goal.
yeah, I agree 1000%. I think football is such an inclusive sport that, as long as you got a pulse and a heartbeat and the mindset you want to be out there, you can go. It doesn't matter if you're 300 pounds, 140 pounds like I was back in the day. Like, it doesn't make a difference, right? It's a place that welcomes all, but it also creates that opportunity to have a goal, right? You're waking up every day and you got a goal. I got to be at practice. I got to learn this. I got to do this. I got to implement this. I got to, everybody's got the same goal that week: win the next game, right? And I think those values that are taught in football honestly last through life, because it's a scenario and a situation where you got people on a team coming from all these different socioeconomic backgrounds, right? Nobody knows what's going on in everybody's homes and whatnot. But here on this field at this moment in time, we're all one. right? There's no individuals out here. If the O linemen aren't blocking, the quarterback's not going to have a good game, or the running back's not going to have a good game. If the quarterback isn't throwing the ball to the receivers, hey, the receivers aren't going to have good games, right? So it's like there's such accountability factor to you knowing what you got to do and you also executing what you got to do, right? And I think like in life, that's a lot like life, especially now you talk like we're fathers and we're older now. Like now the accountability is I gotta be accountable to my children and my wife. I gotta be accountable in my household. I gotta figure it out so that their lives can be easier, right? And impactful, right? So I think football is such a huge tool in life. And going back to, the like people making the pros, right? From the my generation, we had football BC, it was Team BC, and there were 7 guys on our Team BC team that made the pros, and we all played against each other in the league, and that was pretty unbelievable. But I attest to that to the leadership, right? In terms of creating the opportunity for all of us to have our own experiences and playing with our teams, but also the coaching that all of us had received, right? And then in the dedication and commitment that those coaches gave to us, because it really opened the doors for so many of us.
Well, and it's not only the coaches that instill that value and self-worth in the players and the commitment to team, it's also everybody around from the volunteers to the parents. And I do want to go back to the fact that your mom didn't want you to play football. And that's a story that I can certainly relate to. And I think a lot of people out there can relate to, no matter what collision sport they may be looking at. And yet she saw how much you cared. How did your parents support you in your journey at that time and allow you to pursue what you wanted, Will?
Well, once I committed to it, they were fully supportive, right? They were all in. They were, supporting me, and most importantly, they trusted Coach Turner. And I mean, like he was a teacher at the school for many years. He also had a relationship with my mom, right? And that was powerful, right? So long as she knew I was in good hands, and at the end of the day, honestly, I think it was just my time was filled, right? Like I think, and that's the thing when you look at young people and young men, especially, like how do you tie in that time? How do you give them something to stay a part of, and so they're just not roaming the streets and doing whatever, right? And I think like that was a huge tool and a part of it as well.
So I want to fast forward to where we're at now and a little bit of how we got there because that's your youth sports journey. And it obviously impacted you to the point where once you were done playing professional football, you wanted to go into coaching. That's a natural transition for a lot of athletes, but you've taken it beyond that. You founded Game Ready Fitness. Tell us a little bit about what Game Ready Fitness is and why you decided to take your life and your professional life in that direction.
Well, yeah, Game Ready is sort of just happened just the way things go in life. We'd moved out here to Delta, and I was at a gym, and another athlete who was a football player saw me working out at this gym, and then so we were talking. His name was Nevers Bassi, and we were talking, and I was asking him. I said, like, is there a gym around here that has platforms, right? Because you couldn't do any type of Olympic lifting at the gym I was at. He's like, oh yeah, we'll go over to this other gym. They got platforms and whatnot, and so we all started training, and then a bunch of guys started. Like other pros would come, we'd all work out together and whatnot. And it was funny because, we had a young guy come into the gym one day, this young guy named Jordan Lennon, and just a high school kid, and he comes up and it's like, there's 15 pros working out here, and he's like, "Hey, can I join the group?" And so we're looking at him, right? And they're like, "What do you mean?" Right? But we said, "You know what? If you wanna be here, these are the times. Come in, these are the times." And sure enough, that young fella showed up, and he showed up and he did awesome, and, obviously he had a great senior year in his high school and whatnot. And, at that point, it was like, like I was blessed to have great coaching and, people that taught me, but not only just on the football field, right? I had an amazing coach, Coach Mike Talek, that, we did Olympic lifting with and taught me how to do it. I was already a year playing pro football before I'd done a power clean. It truly changed my whole lifting perspective. My lifts, my squats, my bench, everything went right through the roof, and it was just amazing. And so here this young person was asking me now about the opportunity, and I was like, "Yeah, well, we definitely gotta do this." And, so we did that, and then the next year, we ran a pilot project, and it was like 8 youth in the program, just a small group, and all those kids did unbelievable. Like they all became all-stars, got scholarships and whatnot. Some of them playing with the Rams and things, right? And from there, we just built out the program, and it was truly just about keeping kids tied in, number one, but also creating the opportunity and using the expertise that we had learned and been blessed with and passing that forward to the next generation so they can have the similar goals.
Now, many of our listeners and viewers may not know the scope of Game Ready, and that's why I wanted to get into it because from that description, it does sound like a lot of training facilities where aspiring young athletes would go and train with former or current professionals. That is only an aspect of what is offered at Game Ready because you make sure that this platform and the facilities are available to youth across socioeconomic boundaries. How did that expansion happen, and why was that so important to you and the rest of your team to do that well?
What is life and what are the true tools behind like the opportunities you've been blessed with and given? And I think that mentorship and having a coach in your life is such a powerful tool, right? And I live that because my own daughters, right? I would tell them all the time, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. But then they go to the center and then Coach Lucas tells them the same thing. And all of a sudden they're coming home. Dad, coach said this. Coach said I got to do this. I've been telling you for 2 years, right? But it's just like because it's coming from coach, now it carries real weight, right? And they're kids, right? But at the end of the day, like honestly, the biggest blessing is, the centers that we have are provided by the Washington Kids Foundation. It's the most unbelievable a charity, I believe personally, not only in BC, but within the country. And because it just opens the doors and it provides coaching, right? When we look at our youth of today's world, we really don't know what they're dealing with, what they're going through, right? But the thing is we understand the impact and the value of a coach in a child's life. And so the goal of the programs are to create that mentorship, create those coaches that can cheer them on, empower them, believe in them. And we use physical literacy as a tool, right? Physical literacy is a tool that will help these kids be believe in themselves, right? We talk about in an example, if a child's told to do, 5 push-ups, right? And there the kids down, they did 2 push-ups, and you know what? They're struggling to get that third one, and they want to quit. But then you got the coach saying, "No, no, come on, you can do it, get it done, right?" Boom, and they do that third one. What happens? All of a sudden, now that child realizes that if I just push myself, I can really do it because you get that short win. But the thing is in life, and we look at it as a life tool, is when youth are navigating through life and they reach some adversity, now subconsciously they know that if they just persevere and push through that, guess what? They'll be okay. Right. And so the goal is alleviating people from quitting on themselves, right? Believing that they can really achieve, right? And one of the biggest things that we talk to our coaches is you have to understand, you don't know that there's a ceiling. They don't know. They don't know that they shouldn't be able to lift all this weight or they shouldn't be able to run that. But guess what? With the coaching, with the mentorship, all those things, guess what? They create this whole broad perspective of the world's up here. It's not like this. It's not capped off. You can really accomplish anything you dream of and want to pursue. And so, yeah, like the program's been amazing. We do a lot of work with the school districts as well with youth because the tools that physical literacy and the mentorship and coaching bring to youth, right? A lot of the kids with the Washington Kids Foundation, they don't necessarily have they're not a part of sporting teams and things like this. But we believe all youth can have the opportunity to have a coach and mentor in their lives, right? And with the Game Ready, it is you get the entry level youth, right? Starting out maybe 6, 7 years old. The swim classes your daughters play swim? Do they swim? Yeah. Okay, so swim classes, right? Yeah, you go from one level to the next level to the next level, right? But again, that's the mentorship. That's what you're showing is like, so when a youth are in our programs and what they see is, yeah, they're here at 7, 8 years old. But guess what? They're looking at the 10, 11-year-olds over there and be like, I want to get in that group, you know? And then 11, 12-year-olds are looking at the next level, looking at, oh, I want to get in that 13, 14-year-old group. And then the 14s are looking to the 18-year-olds like, I want to get there. And so what happens is you create an environment where youth have positive mentors, right? Where they can also see what it is that they're trying to achieve, right? Because oftentimes how does a youth know what he or she can do if they don't even know it exists? But if now they're seeing other peers that they're looking up to that are doing this and doing this, what happens is you create that buy-in, right? Because they want to be those kids, right? And that's the power of, simply running program where kids can have a chance to grow, evolve, develop, and pursue, right?
Well, and one of the things that really strikes me about Game Ready is that there are different entry points no matter where you come from and your economic situation. So you have the ability to train potential pro players, players who are in the minors of whatever sport they're in that have the financial means to pay for that level of coaching. However, you also have after school programs where kids as young as 6, 7, whatever ages you were talking about earlier, will are able to not only have a place that is open to them and inclusive to them, but in many cases there's transport involved as well. You're breaking down barriers for both access and inclusion, and I'd love to know what difference you've seen it make in the lives of not only these kids, but the families.
Well, I'm glad you said that, right, Scotty? Because like the thing is, yes, you're impacting that youth in that moment, at that present time, but really you are supporting the family, right? Since we've implemented programming since 2008, we've never turned away a youth due to financial scenarios and situations, right? We've been able to try to support these youth because the impact for that one child definitely has the impact with the families. But also the thing is, life is a tough place. I think most people wanna do the best, and as a parent, I think the majority of parents wanna create the best life possible for their children, and sometimes, in a society that's built upon money, sometimes you can't do the things you wanna do for your child because of that barrier, and I think, like, with the Washington Kids Foundation, it alleviates those barriers, right? We have an amazing family, Mr. Kyle Washington and his family, and they truly believe in empowering community through family. And I think it's such a powerful thing to have because, like you stated, the transport. There's buses every single day that are on that road from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening, all throughout the different municipalities, picking up youth right at their neighborhood, right? You alleviate that barrier of I got to get over here, or kids going home to empty houses after school because both parents are working, right? You alleviate those barriers and you keep them tied in, right? One of the other big things that the foundation does is feeds the youth, feeds the children at the center. They get hot food, right? We have summer camps that run all summer long, week-long summer camps. Every child gets a chance to participate, and they get picked up with the bus. They get brought to the centers. They get a hot breakfast, right? They get their lunches. They get their after programming at the end of camp, another meal, and it's really just like you're just looking to support kids and families within our community, right? And I think that's powerful. And for me, having an opportunity to be a part of that is truly, truly fulfilling, right? I think it's a true blessing.
And now if we zoom out a little bit and look at the entire youth sports environment as we currently see it, that is more of an anomaly, what you're doing, offering that type of access and inclusion because we currently exist in a youth sports environment where club sport has taken over and the professionalism of youth sport has taken over to a greater extent than it ever has before. And there are some benefits to that, Will, and there are some drawbacks to that. And one of the drawbacks, I think I just mentioned, lack of access to some because of not only money, but because of transportation, because of time. And I look at parents in this environment right now, and that's why I started this podcast. I think parents are overwhelmed. I think they don't know what to do. I think they want to do exactly what you said, the best thing for their child, but they're not sure what that is. And so they will do whatever the person next to them does or whatever the peer group does instead of saying, all right, what do I really want at the end of the day for my child? And unfortunately, I think they get caught up on this youth sports treadmill and don't know how to get off. Do you see the same thing in the overall landscape right now?
I think what happened in today's world is there's lots and lots of resources that people can tap into, right? And I think due to social media, there's so many options, right? Whereas before, when I was growing up, there was no social media, right? And you had to know somebody, and then you try to get in, right? But the thing is now with social media and whatnot, and what's available, right? And there's so many people doing all different development training, like sports specific training, all these different things. Definitely for a parent, it can be really overwhelming, right? And the majority of people are honestly trying to lead with the best foot forward. I think they're trying to do the best they can and offer the best resources available to families and youth. And it's a tough deal out there because there's just so many to choose from, right? And I think like we deal with it a lot with the like we have our club football, for example, 7-on-7, right? Coach Jordan Lennon started that, him and G-Roy. And it's one of those things where people say, "Well, why wouldn't my child be playing different sports?" Right? Like why wouldn't they be playing like multiple sports? And when I grew up, oh, I played basketball, football, soccer, volleyball, everything. Today, a lot of kids don't make the basketball team. What do? They have nothing to do. They're idle time. So then that's where you see club sports come in that can now fulfill that time. So parents still have the way to keep those youth tied in, right? That they're getting coached, they're getting better at what they do, but they're also living their passion and what they're trying to accomplish and do, right? And I think like it's important that we have those things because before they didn't exist, right? I also think like there's great benefit, right? One of the old analogies with pro sports is the 10,000-hour rule, right? You know, and you talk about it. Hey, there is 100% no question about it. A youth does 1,000 reps in the off season, right? And then they come back to try out for the same team in the fall, right? Who's got a lot better? They did, right? Because they put in the effort, the time, they got coached, but they also had the game experiences in order to apply it now to the next season as they develop, right? People can say that, oh, you shouldn't specialize in this sport or you shouldn't specialize in that. You should play multiple sports. But what if kids don't want to play other sports? What do they do? So you provide those avenues, and that's where the beauty of it is, people have a choice, right? People have a choice. Like I know parents that, they won't play off-season 7-on-7. They'll run track. They'll focus on track, which is amazing because they know if the youth's gonna excel, they need to be getting faster. So they'll take that time, that window, and use it for track, but still the goal is the youth wants to play university football, right? So there's all different ways that you could accomplish different goals and whatnot, what the youth are trying to aspire to do. But I think like as far as for parents that are overwhelmed, I think talking to people is key. I think number one is you talk to somebody who's done it, right? Somebody who has maybe their kids are a little older and they've had these different experiences, and then they can give you the real feedback of what really goes on. I think like that's the biggest, most powerful tool, right? Is using the resources that are around you, and don't be afraid to ask questions. The dumbest question is the question not asked, right? So I think it's so powerful that you step out your comfort zone a little bit, do a little digging, call up organizations, call different people, see who's been there, reach out, because I mean at the end of the day, like your child's what we're all living for now. Right? Like my time's older. I'm 50 years old. Like I'm done. I'll never play football again. I love going to the games. I'm a big fan. But at the end of the day, like this is their time now, right? And as a parent looking to do it, especially if it's something you didn't participate in or didn't weren't around or surrounded by, definitely talk to other parents that have been there. Talk to former athletes, right? Reach out. A lot of people are just good people and they understand the scenario and the situation you're in, and they love to support you.
I think the two things you said there that are really important are one, the conversation. Talk to as many different people as you can. It's not just one way. And then the other is exactly that. There is not one path to where you want to get. There are so many different ways to get to where you want to get. And in general, I would have a multi sport philosophy, but I've seen kids, and you've seen kids, as you described, that they have a love for one sport. They don't have a lot of interest in other sports. And they may have tried them. I hope they have, but they just don't take to them. So now, if we're going to choose to specialize, which is going to be some path for some kids, How do we do that responsibly? Because the worry about specialization for me is one, too early for most sports. And then the other is the developmental pieces around that when it comes to injury, when it comes to mental overload. So, and I know at Game Ready, this is something you would profess. And because you've been to the highest level, you understand this. But all right, if we're going to specialize in one sport, what are we going to do for the neuromuscular development around that so you're not going to get injured? So we're not doing the exact same pattern repetition all the time. I think that's one of the pitfalls of specialization if you don't understand the whole picture of it.
For sure. I think and that's where, we talk about the workouts, right? Your training, right? What are you doing in your training? Right? Oftentimes like you need to be mixing up the agility with the plyometrics, with the speed, right? You got to encompass the full body, right? And it's all about getting kids moving and using their explosiveness, right? Using their power. And I think like, when you talk about a youth not getting to develop the full athlete, is sort of why, entry level sports we talk about, soccer is such a big deal. You're dealing with a full athlete. You got speed, you got agility, you got hand-eye coordination, hand-foot coordination, right? You have like, in terms of like specialized sports like baseball, is that's a little different. Yeah, you gotta have speed, you gotta have some agility, but those things aren't worked on so much. And I think that's where we talk about going back to breaking down the athlete. Like when we talk about like game ready and the programming, right, is developing the athlete, right? Because that athlete then can transition to all these different sports, right? So when you go to a program at the center, you're going to see youth that are hockey players, youth that are football players, baseball players. They're all working out together, right? When I trained, when I was in the pros, we'd be training out with NHL players, hockey players. The football is a lot different than a hockey game, right? Like I couldn't skate 5 steps, but those guys could fly, right? But then they also probably couldn't race for a touchdown on the field, right? But the end of the day is when your training philosophies are to develop the full scope of the athlete, every sport wins. You look down south, right? You look in America, right? Oh, huge development programs. Like the programs for strength conditioning and agility, unbelievable. In Canada is getting better, but that's the key, right? You want your son or child to do better, right? In the game, developing the athlete is huge, right? Because then they're going to be provided with the tools, but also their whole bodies developed so that they can excel now. It has definitely changed a lot since, like I told you, I was in the pros before I'd ever done a power clean. Had no idea what it was, right? And so I think like that is getting better in Canada. But when you're looking to develop the athletes and reduce obviously season injuries and things like this, developing that full athlete is the key.
So a lot of what we just talked about in that part of the answer was about what we consider high performance athletes. And that's a subset of athletics. But I know that's not all or most of the kids that you see at Game Ready. So, what do you want the kids who are not on that particular pathway where they're going to pursue sports at the ultimate level? What do you want them to get out of sports and your program?
Confidence, right? I think a big thing is also use aptitude, right? And when we talk about that is like how well a young person can receive information, then also then apply that information to a task, right? I think that along with the like you say the confidence that comes from physical literacy and training are huge. But also the one of the biggest things is and we talk about barriers is why a lot of adults don't go to the gym when they're older is intimidation because they don't know like they don't know what to do. you know but the thing is like working out is like riding a bike, right? If you learn the proper tools from good coaches when you're young, you're going to be able to apply that your entire life, right? So when you're older and you're a father and you just need to get in shape. You know exactly what to go do at the gym. You know how to use the equipment. You know what to do. You have confidence, right? But also, I think it's the self esteem that it brings, right? It is what do they say? When you look good, feel good, play good is what they say, right? But in life, it's also just simply about feeling good, right? And working out releases your natural endorphins, right? Where you feel amazing. And it is funny because like when we're talking about this here, And just a little diversion here, but when youth are playing sports and youth are in strength conditioning programs, doing the physical literacy activities and whatnot, the coaching and the mentorship, right? All these kids are told, way to go, you're awesome, high five, you did it. They get consistently validated and supported and encouraged, right? And I do some other trainings with the Be More Than a Bystander program, with the Ending Violence Association of British Columbia. And so we go into workplaces and talk about things and whatnot. And it's, one of the things I always say is I go, so, you got a group of leaders in the room here. So when's the last time somebody told you that you're awesome? Sort of everybody just looks at you, all the adults. It's funny, right? We're all human beings. We all yearn for that nourishment, just that little bit of like encouragement that like somebody says, you're amazing. It feels good, right? You know, but the thing is sort of leaves when you're an adult, right? And so I think like that's like one of those things like it's a little bit of a different topic, but it's sort of like, we understand the value of it. And so when I talk to these adults about that, they really understand like how impactful those words are and just somebody in your life that's going to cheer you on, right? How powerful they are. And then they understand why it's so important to get youth involved and tied in to programming, right? Like we talked about the physical literacy program the foundation does, right? Those kids aren't playing like on sporting teams and things like this, right? A few are, but at the end of the day, guess what? They need encouragement. They need support. They need to understand that if they apply themselves, they can accomplish many great things, right? But without having that opportunity, how do they get that?
What you just said to me is the difference between what I don't think we want young people or anyone really to do and what we actually want for them. That's the difference between fitting in and belonging. And it sounds like you're giving these young people a place where they belong and convincing them you belong here. You don't have to do something different. You just have to be here and you belong. And really, that is the greatest gift in terms of self confidence we can give young people, isn't it?
100%. I agree. I know this, this is like, there's that show. You ever seen that show Cheers? Right? Okay. So Norm shows up there all the time, right? And guess what? When he walks in the door, everybody knows his name, right? And guess what? He keeps showing up every day, right? Because he belongs there, right? Like he has a family outside of his family. And that's so important, right? And we talk about the youth centers with the Washington kids is it's a place where every child can come and somebody knows their name. They have a sense of belonging. This is their safe place. This is a place where they can come. This is a place where they can have people that are encouraging them, supporting them, believing in them, because the value that creates, right, is priceless in life, and it allows people to grow, right? I think it's one of the things when we look at youth and mental health and different issues that young people are facing in life. I think it's a huge resource for parents because parents can give that nourishment, but it's just like I told you, hey, Coach Lucas said it, Dad. It's the way, you know. Sometimes you need somebody outside of yourself to be able to have those great words for your child because that's what they're going to receive, and they take it a little different, right? Yeah.
I agree with you. And I have 2 daughters, and they're younger than your 2 daughters. So my oldest is on the verge of the, yeah, yeah, it's just what my parents said, so it's not important. My youngest still thinks that whatever we say is gospel,
There you
but
go.
they transition, and you've been through it because your daughters are a little older than mine. What was your approach to sports and athletics with your own kids, Will?
Well, they didn't play football, so yeah,
Mine
I'm a
neither.
father. I'm a girl dad. I got 2 daughters, but you know what the thing was? You're learning. Most of us first time being a parent, right? And my daughter's told me that one time before. She's like, "It's okay, Dad. We know you're a first time dad." Right? It's just like, well, what did I do wrong? Right? But at the end of the day, it's the truth, right? So for me as a father with 2 daughters, my life has been fully about football, fully about working out. And I didn't really look outside the world much, outside of that world of the football world, right? And then I have my daughters. And then I was so happy to see that we have such amazing organizations and programming that are available to them because I knew the power of playing on a team. I knew all the benefits that I got from it. And when I got introduced to the girls' worlds of sports, it was truly amazing, right? Like my daughters played soccer and then they fell in love with volleyball, both of them. And I tell you what, man, there is some amazing organizations out here that are fully about the youth. They're fully about trying to create opportunities for them, but most importantly, they accept them. They welcome them into their organizations and they're there for them. The coaches show up every day. The coaches do the best they can. And not saying coaches are perfect by any means, but I trust that people are leading with their best intentions, right? And I honestly couldn't have been more happy with my experience with my daughters in just the organizations and the programming that was available to them. It was very exciting, so I'm excited for you because you're about to be on that journey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But
Well, and I am. I'm certainly in that youth sports world right now. And I think we probably have pretty similar approaches because I've coached before. You've coached and continue to coach. So you understand that that's not my role in that environment. I'm
yeah,
not coach for you there.
yeah,
I'm your dad.
yeah.
And I think that is a barrier that some parents find challenging, that because they might have some knowledge about a sport, they also want to be the coach, even though they're not technically the coach. I must stand back and let the coaches coach unless there is some major issue where we have to have that talk about what's going on in the situation. Do you have the same philosophy?
Yeah, I think it is let the coaches coach, right? Let the coaches coach. The biggest thing that, I find coaching, and it's hard. It is hard, right? Like it's really hard because parents, like, their child is their whole world, right? Their whole world. And if they're viewing something as their child's being done wrong and they're not getting playing time or this and this, right? Like they get upset, right? Which they natural response. They should. But it's also one of the things where you have to sort of trust what the coaches are doing, right? I think, like, coaches are looking to put kids in positions where they can succeed and have wins, right? You don't want to put a youth out in a scenario, in a situation where the child's going to fail, right? Because that is not going to do anything good, right? They're going to fail in front of their peers. They're going to feel demoralized themselves. They're not going to have the same feeling as if they had made a great play or won or did something really well, right? And so therefore, that's where the trust factor comes in, right? And I've been a dad in that exact scenario, in that exact situation. I drive all the way to Seattle for the tournament, right? Okay, I had to stay in a hotel the night before the game, the whole nine, right? And there I am watching, and my daughter's not playing, right? And in my mind, I'm losing my mind, right? Like I I came all this way, this and this and this, right? But at the end of the day, because I played sports at a high level, I had to understand that she's just not in a position right now to be on the court. Does that make sense? Right? And I got to
It
trust the
does.
coaches because the thing is, when you look at a coach, the coach is there to win. The coach is, wants to remain a coach, right? And the way you remain a coach is if you win games, right? And I go in, and that's the thing. So when people sit there and say, "Oh, this and this and this," well, no, I'm going to bet on what the coach's thoughts were because they're trying to win the game. They're not purposely showing up and trying to lose the game. So they're going to put the best kids out there that they have a chance and feel are going to put the team in a position to succeed, right? And I think the thing is as long as you have the opportunity to practice so you can give the kids an opportunity to become better, right? That's fair, right? And I think my daughters, like, they both did really, really well, fortunately. And when they were at the like the what do you, like, I guess it'd be like the senior, right? So they weren't the junior, they became the senior, then they're playing, right? Which is fair. But they earned that opportunity, right? And I think that's something we got to look at as parents, right? Just to understand how the dynamics work, right? And I think, like, when you understand that, you can really, be a little bit more relaxed with it.
Yeah, and I do think we're talking about different levels here. We're not talking about 9-year-old kids where 9-year-old kids should all be
Yeah.
playing. They should
No,
well,
100%.
you're talking about at a much higher level.
Yeah, like, where you're trying to get scholarships and things like this, right? And at the youth level, like, it's just about participation, right? Get kids out there, get them the experiences, right, that they can have. I think when we get into even grade 6 and 7 football, it becomes a little different, right? It's not quite like soccer, where I think every youth should just be on the field and get an opportunity, equal time, the whole nine, right? Because that gives a chance to develop, but also have those experiences. In football, it becomes a little different when kids, it becomes a safety issue, right? And I've witnessed it and I've seen it, right? I was coaching at one of the community organizations. We had a couple kids on the team that they're just not ready for contact, and it really, really is scary as a coach, right? Because you want to put the child there, you really do, right? But then it's like, if that kid gets hurt, you'll wear that your whole life, you know? And part of being a coach is, number one rule is looking out for the child, right? Always put the child in a position to have a chance to succeed, right? Where they're not going to be injured or whatnot. And I think so in football, it's a little more kind of complex there with that thought. But I think like there are phenomenal sports out there that kids can participate in and develop. And especially like you said, at the young age, it's like when I was saying the elementary school, every child got the chance to play, right? The issue with the elementary school programming was, when my daughters, when they were in elementary school, both of them made the volleyball team, right? At elementary school, pretty much every girl in the grade made the volleyball team, right? And so they transitioned to high school. And my daughter comes home and she's like, "Yeah, they announced that volleyball tryouts are tomorrow after school in the gym." And you talk about anxiety, you talk about your heart start pounding, and I was terrified. I'm sitting there like, you're putting on a smile for your child, but inside I was just like, oh my, right? Because I know that 5 elementary schools are all fed into that one high school. And so every one of these elementary schools had a volleyball team, and all the girls made it. And they enjoyed it because why? They got validated, they got cheered on, they felt a sense of belonging, right? All these different amazing gifts that they received. So now they're in high school. Oh, and they all want to play on a volleyball team. So now you have 60 kids trying out for a team. There's only 11 or 12 of them are going to make the team. And let me tell you something, you talk about not breathing. That was real tough because like they showed up in the gym and now there's just not 10 kids. There's 50, 60 kids. And sure enough, I was really blessed that my daughters made the teams, both of them. But I tell you what, those kids that didn't make the team, you talk about vulnerability, you talk about impact. The impact of them not making that team, every single one of those little girls had to walk that hallway at school the next day. And they're kids. So they told all their friends they're trying out. They told their family told extended family, told their friends, right? And now that young person didn't make that team. And that is devastating, right? We even had calls from parents um, of kids that didn't make the team, right? That, hey, my daughter won't come out of the room. Can my daughter come over and play? Right? And it was just like at that moment, that was like something, it was like I really felt it's tough, right? A big lesson to learn, right? In front of all your peers, especially where you're trying to identify who you are amongst this whole new school, right? And so, yeah.
Well, and this is part of the reason that I think programs like the one you're running at Game Ready are so important, is because the reality is there's one or two grade 8 volleyball teams, depending on the size of your school. But like you said, there's 60 or 70 kids who want to play. And I am a firm believer that, well, only 12 or 24 of them might have the requisite skill level to be on those particular teams. 70 girls or 70 boys should have an opportunity to still play the sport. We need other avenues. Just because they're not represented at their school, there needs to be a place for them to go and a place for them to play where they do belong and have a chance, because guess what? They might just be late developers. They might not have grown yet. They might have never played the sport before. And if we don't give them those avenues, we end up with the stats we see, Will, which are kids dropping out of sport because they feel they're not good enough or it's not fun anymore. And that is simply not true.
It's just a very tough scenario situation, right? Working with the City of Surrey School District, some of the schools have implemented now like tutorial sports, right? So now every kid, you can be with your friends and just put in a team and you're still playing like you're playing basketball. And it's like, just tournament style all every lunch hour, right? And so it's a great time. The kids, because like you said, it's youth just need a chance, right? They most importantly, they just need something to be tied into that they can get excited about and be passionate about, right? People are looking at it and realizing like, yeah, this is a real issue right here. This transitional year, like it's hard enough as it is, but then taking away, their tie-ins, what they're used to. So I think like, you can applaud people for, trying to do the best they can, trying to figure out solutions to the situation.
So you said earlier, getting kids tied in is so important, and it's really a function of the coaches you have and the belief and confidence they can instill in them. There are a lot of people who know how to play a sport. Not all of them should be coaching a sport. How do you identify and find quality coaches, Will?
Well, for us is lived experience, right? Is, we got to have coaches that have actually lived it. I think because, you've also experienced coaches in your life that have been amazing coaches. And then you also experience coaches that weren't so good, right? And so what we talk to the coaches about, you just simply be the way that your best coach in your life was. That's what you want. We want you to be for these children, right? The thing is one of the things that we do and we do in our trainings is like, you also can't coach the way, like if it's somebody like older like myself, you can't coach the way we got coached. That just doesn't fly in today's world, right? It doesn't fly at all, right? I got to be able to navigate that with people, right? Because sports is a very like passionate environment when the games are playing, right? Like people get excited, right? And sometimes they just revert and it's just like, no, you can't do that. You can't talk like that to the kids, right? And it's something like that you have to take pride in that you're working on, you're trying to build because, at the end of the day, you're now building future leaders, right? These are now the new leaders to lead the youth, which are therefore then going to be the new leaders, right? And I think it's sort of how do you say it is complex, but it's just something that just needs to be understood and it's just got to be implemented, right? I'll share a quick story. I was down a couple weeks ago. I was in Arizona and I was at my godson's football game, right? And he's 12 years old, right? And so youth football, right? And down there, like the stands actually get pretty packed, right? So it was funny because like one of the youth on the other team messed up, right? And so the coach is on the sideline, and because the kid's on the field, he raising his voice like, "Don't do that, you can't, you got to this and this," right? And so all of a sudden, the dad comes down. And this he's a big guy. Like he's probably 6'6", right? And he comes right on in the field and he's just in this coach's face, giving it to him, right? And this coach isn't backing down either, right? And then so all of a sudden we're across the stands watching this, right? And then all of a sudden you look up in the stands behind their bench and the moms are just wham, they're Superman punches. They're brawling in the stands. It's a kid's football game. We're sitting there like, I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. Like, what's happening? You know? And it was one of those things is where, the adults trying to get involved, you know? And it was probably one of the saddest moments I will pretty much in youth sports I've ever witnessed. Because what happened is that all happened, it died down. And at halftime, that dad and like five other parents took their kids and the kids had to leave the game and they left. They quit the team in the middle of the game. And it was just one of those things where you're like, how is this possible? What's going on here? Like what like all the things that you shouldn't be teaching and doing just happened. And like what can you do? You're watching this going on. And it just shows you like it's not the parents' time, it's the kids' time when they're playing, right? And the kids are there to be coached, right? And taught, right? But I also understand because there's ways that you are supposed to communicate and pass knowledge on, right? I think like now we're blessed because we understand that everybody learns a little different. All of us learn a little different, right? And I think when you're a coach, you should take great pride in that because this child you got to present things this way to, this child you present things this way to, right? Because therefore, when you do that and you're not yelling, you're not demeaning, you're not belittling, guess what? That child's gonna give you everything, right? Because they're excited. They know, like, like you're trying to get them better, right? And it was just one of those an extreme example of just old school coaching, right? Not being tolerated. Both sides could have handled things a lot better, right? But this is also a reality of where we are in today's sports, right?
It is. And I mean, it's a very simple question to you or anyone else out there. You ever play a perfect football game or perfect
No chance.
basketball?
No
No,
chance.
no.
No, hundred
And it's
percent.
part of it. It's why we actually like sports, because if everybody played every play perfectly, nothing would happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Nothing would happen in
Yeah,
sports.
yeah,
Somebody has to be a little bit lesser on each play for something to happen
yeah.
and for the game to have the drama that it does. And that's okay. And that's part of why we love sports, is because we want, especially in this case, our children to fail in safe environments and realize that they get another play and
There
they
you
get
go.
another game and they get
Yeah,
another practice, because when they lose their job or get broken up with, the world isn't going to end and you're going to have to pick yourself back up somehow. And if we don't teach them that through these quote unquote safe environments, they're not going to learn well.
yeah. And that's where the one of the greatest tools is resilience, right? But it's also just being able to adapt. I think life is about adaptation, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the other part of coaching that I would say as well, is that when I see coaches in today's environment, and you and I grew up in a time where yelling and coaching was synonymous. Not every coach, but a lot of them. That doesn't fly anymore, as you alluded to earlier, because we understand that's not how most people learn positively. Most people respond well to positive feedback. And if more coaches took this approach, when a player doesn't execute something I think I have taught that player well, I obviously haven't done a good enough job teaching it.
Take a little bit of ownership for it. And that's what makes a great coach, right? And I think like that is key because that's how you succeed, right? But it also that's how a coach creates buy-in from the team, right? And I think when you have buy-in from everybody, that's when you succeed and you win, right? So when you look at like the great coaches, that have been around forever, right? You ask any of the players, they love that guy. They love him. They would do anything for him. He's a great person, somebody who really advocated for him, wanted to see them succeed, and that's what it's about. And I think like when you look at the different values and tools that a coach can give to a young person, and those tools last a lifetime. If they're done the right way, right? I it's funny, right? Because like when you talk about impact of coaches, right? I was doing a training actually a couple weeks ago as well, and had a young guy come up. He was not young anymore. He's maybe about 35, right? But he came up to me and he was talking about his experience as a youth football player. He really, now that he's older, didn't appreciate the way he was coached, the way he was talked to, because he was felt like he was belittled, put down, and this grown man now had tears in his eyes, and I just you really felt bad, right? Like, 'cause I'm sorry that that was your lived experience, that, like, what you had to go through. But I think the thing is, he's obviously got a great career and doing really well in life and obviously applies some of the tools he learned in football. But it was just like when you look at coaching and youth is the role that you play as a coach is huge. Like, I honestly believe if somebody calls you coach, that is 100% the greatest name a person can refer you to as. Because when you look at what do coaches offer and what are coaches supposed to be, right? It's the mentor, it's the encourager, the empower, the person that believes in you, the one that's going to put you in a position and lead you so you can succeed, right? Those are huge values that come with that title coach. And I think when we're talking about it and we're bringing on new coaches and we're teaching new coaches how to coach, like those are tools that are there that if you execute those, things are gonna be in it. You'll succeed.
Yeah, it's something that coaches need to remember at the end of the day. You can build every single one of your players up, or you can tear each and every one of them down. What impact you want to have in the long run. Will, I know you guys are doing things the right way. I really appreciate you having buy-in to this project and spreading the message to parents out there to try to help them with their journey through youth sports with their own children. Thank you very much for doing this.
No, thank you, Scott. Appreciate the opportunity. And just the last words to parents out there: be present is the number one thing in life as a parent. Be present. Take the time, enjoy the moments in time that you have, right? Get to your kids' games, right? Be their biggest cheerleader, be their biggest advocate, because these moments are priceless in life. And when you look for what are we living for, that's truly living with purpose. So I wish every one of these parents out there that hopefully tune in and watch, I wish you nothing but the best, nothing but success for your children. But the most important thing is you being there, you being present for your kids. At the end of the day, you are the greatest coach they have.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and you found some tangible takeaways that you can bring with you in your journey to becoming a better sports parent. The best way for you to support this podcast is for you to subscribe, follow, rate, review, and drop us a comment on whichever platform you're watching or listening. And the fastest way for us to grow this podcast and reach more parents out there is for you to share it with your respective networks and to tell people that you see at your youth sporting events when you're there with your children. Big thanks to Lightstock Music and Andre Diaconou for the music on this podcast, which is a production of Toolkit Content. Until next time, happy sports parenting. And remember, have fun out there. That's what it's supposed to be about.